All right, everybody, welcome back to the Covenant Cast. I'm your host, Steven.
And I'm Jonathan.
And today, Jonathan's here, so we're definitely going to be talking about some KeyForge. We're also going to cover the Magnum Opus event for Netrunner that has kind of come down the pipeline, all of the fancy things you get for going to that event, and then the return to the Dunwich Legacy upgrade expansion just released. So that's exciting. And we're also going to dig into some philosophy about presents. Not the kind that you open, but the kind that you feel. So stay tuned. All right, Jonathan, well, it's good to have you on the podcast.
Why, thank you.
Been a hot minute.
Yeah, I have been working on a lot of stuff behind the scenes, so I haven't had the mental capacity nor the time to.
You know, it's worth noting. So we've got a really big announcement coming for Arkham Horror, as well as KeyForge.
Yes.
Regarding
that's right.
Regarding some products and things. Also, a big announcement on the way for Champions, and a lot of exciting movement throughout a couple of the new games that is not quite ready for discussion.
I finally understand. You know, whenever we interview Jeremy for Destiny, he's like, "I'm on set 1 billion from what you're talking about." So whenever you said a big new announcement coming from Arkham, I had no idea what you were talking about. But now I'm looking at it, and it's really, really exciting. It's something I've been excited about for months now.
I've been amped about it for a while too. And you're right. It's kind of that as a company gets bigger, I guess the timelines get longer, which can be both frustrating and kind of cool to see that there's so many working parts now that make the old Covenant engine tick, and I'm sure more to come. So stay tuned for that, guys. We cannot wait to share some of these things with you. On that note, while I've got you, let's just kick this thing off with some KeyForge. Because
I'm super excited about
KeyForge. The reason I want to talk about it is you are if ever there was a target audience on a whiteboard somewhere in the FFG halls, your picture should have essentially been framed and circled a couple of times.
Right.
Maybe with your wife, side by side. So tell the audience and me, I guess we haven't really talked about it too much, about what is going on in your head with KeyForge, and how has it been treating you so far? We've got some decks from Gen Con that we've had access to, and you've had those for a while.
I've had those. I had to return them to the store so that our locals could get a little taste of that. And I really wish that I had them. In fact, we had a long weekend from Labor Day recently, and I wanted nothing more than to play some KeyForge. And this actually kind of gets into what we're going to talk about eventually with face-to-face games versus not so face-to-face games, because we were sitting there and I enjoy playing games. I have a Nintendo Switch, and I enjoy playing video games, and the couch co-op is super fun, but I really kind of want to sit across from somebody, and the KeyForge is easy enough to pick up. My wife already knows it, and so it would have been really nice, and I felt a very strong desire to play this weekend, which is good. Also on top of that, I've been looking at it a lot contrasting to Warhammer Champions.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people in your orbit that are certainly, obsessed is a bit of a strong word, but it's that feeling, when you first get into a new game or a new hobby, really, and a lot of times it's just there's so much discovery and excitement around that's going on that actually Champions is the focus right now in that regard, I think, because it's actually the app, especially the beta of the app, was a big deal because that discovery process is happening absent of products actually being available. And that reprint's on the way, so when that hits, it's gonna blow up a little bit more. But then KeyForge, we're just waiting. Right. So you can play the same decks you've been playing, but there's a certain excitement that's gonna happen whenever the shelves are stocked, as it were. And I think KeyForge is gonna take the spotlight for a little while.
Yeah.
So what? Basically, how do you compare it to Champions in terms of what's going on around you?
Well, so here's the thing. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, but KeyForge, particularly for me, is very exciting because it allows me to participate in a game and a genre of games I really enjoy without having to spend a lot of time outside of the table getting to know the game on the secondary level. So for instance, a couple weeks ago, Steven taught me how to play Warhammer Champions.
Right.
And I'm part of this sort of league thing that we're doing where we're splitting boxes and doing all that stuff. And then, the next week I came in and everyone's just like bonkers for it and they're building their own decks. And I still have my starter deck and I can play it, and I can know how that goes. And now someone's putting new cards in my hand and I was like, well, I don't even have a survey of the landscape to know if these are good or if I should just stick with my starter deck or if that's like a noob thing to do. And so it's very nice to just remove that entire element, because there is the rules of the game that you encounter when you first play. Okay, how do I do X, Y, or Z? And then there's the rules of like how to prepare for the game, or the survey of the field, what cards are good, what cards are bad, what cards are just silly to put in your deck ultimately. The cool thing about the app,
I haven't found any of those yet.
Is it allows you to take that survey quite a bit. I mean, so here's an interesting analogy. I've been playing these like roguelike games, which I've been trying to understand the definition of that.
And that's on the Switch?
On the Switch, yeah. And basically what it is it's a short game that is randomly generated, a lot of procedurally generated stuff, but you play it, the difficulty level is set pretty high, and you play it over and over and over again until you begin to understand the game itself, like not just how you move your character around, but sort of the strategies and how you get through. And I really feel like that's a lot of what the deck building side of things is. So with KeyForge, I can get my deck and go all the way through it, and it's fine. But with something like Champions, the more you play, the more variety of experience you have, the better you understand how to then tweak your deck for that variety of experience. So until I get that, which again I think the app is super great for, and I think it's a very important for bringing people in, and I think it hits on a lot of the points we've talked about before, scaffold learning, that kind of thing. I think until that hits my hands, I'm going to be at a disadvantage because I won't be able to have the kind of experience that you guys already have,
right?
And understanding of it.
That's true, and that there's it really does set up that contrast between a game like KeyForge and Champions, and insert collectible or trading card game here, or even LCG.
Yeah.
Where there's that secondary game that you just have to understand and dive into, and there is an element of that is very fun and very much worth pursuing. But it being absent in KeyForge shouldn't be painted as a negative.
Right.
Because for somebody like you,
it's huge.
The deck building element that is going on outside of the game is actually more of a negative for you than it is a positive. Unless you felt like you had all of the time to really like understand this thing and be on equal footing with everybody else. I feel like once you anticipate there being a knowledge and understanding gap that is kind of not worth investing yourself into just catching up with where everybody else is, you're just like, well, whatever.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I think I'm particularly at risk for it, because I've just noticed in myself throughout the 34 years I've been on this earth that if I appear in public doing something that I don't feel like I have at least a small amount of expertise in, that's a huge negative for me.
Right.
I don't like to fail publicly, and that's that's just that's
contrary to most.
Yeah. Well, some people are okay going out there and learning and that being sort of part of them, but I don't. And it's also nice, I have a sister-in-law or the people that I taught Love Letter to, right? I think KeyForge is a really great next step up, and I actually saw some multiplayer variants that have been posted on the Facebook group, and I can just go in there with any of the decks and know that, hey, look, we're all on the same footing, maybe one deck's good, a little bit better, one deck's a little bit worse, but honestly, we can then trade them, it doesn't matter because the fundamentals of the game are strong, and the decks don't revolve around any sort of crazy knowledge that you don't have going in. Although, as you said with Zach, the more you play a deck, the more you get to know it.
Sure.
But still, it's different.
Well, how quickly was so your wife, whose name is Leah?
Yes.
So she played a little bit of Spoils. She played a decent bit of Spoils in its heyday, which was super cool. How quickly did she pick it up?
She picked it up within, I think, the first game. So by the end of I won the first game. I think she won the second and maybe the third game.
Eventually, you learn how to reap. And
yeah,
that's really the
yeah. She's like, I don't have to kill these things out there. I can just reap. But yeah, that's the thing. She has no great amount of experience with any of this stuff, and I was able to teach her, very quickly throughout the first game. The aesthetics are great. Everything about it I really enjoy, particularly because I can take it anywhere and play it. So
now, the real question that I have for you, and I actually don't know the answer. So we've got anybody that doesn't know that's interested in KeyForge. We've got a display subscription that is minimum advertised price, ships for free right as soon as the game releases, and I want to know, do you have your subscription
This is my first
yet?
Covenant subscription.
You actually have
That
it.
is the KeyForge, and
You
I'm
did
so
it.
excited for it to come out. I mean, the thought of like, was it 9? I think
It's
9?
12.
12 decks,
in a
goodness
box,
gracious. But like, just having 12 decks on the shelf, and I can pull one out and say, all right, let's, do this. Let's have this experience. And if it's something that we like, I'll keep playing that deck, and if not, and I think it's really cool with the bidding of the chains and how they do that, where it says, we both really like playing this deck, but I'll play it with an extra chain on it, and okay, well, fine, you play it with the extra chain. And I think the whole just pitch of it is in the right direction.
I said this in the buyer's guide, which should be up now. I think all of the KeyForge learning videos are going up. They're probably either up right now if you're listening to this, or soon to be. But if you took your 12 deck, display box, and you played one deck a week, that lasts you for 3 months.
It's pretty good.
Which is insane,
That's
right?
really good, yeah.
So like, if you imagine, even if you and Leah did this, like you each had one deck, and then you moved down the list to 1 versus 1, 1 versus 1, and then eventually you've played all of them, and Leah's played all of them.
Oh, nice, yeah.
That'd be really cool. That is
would be super
literally,
fun.
if you had a game night, you could bring a new KeyForge deck every night that you go once a week, and that will last for 3 months.
Yeah.
And then potentially the next set has hit about that time. You get 12 more decks. And that could literally just be your experience with KeyForge. I think that stuff is so cool. Zach and I talked about it last week about maximizing the fun, intentionally, not allowing yourself to min-max as hard as you might want to whenever you are like, I got to get all the cards. And KeyForge doesn't let you ever feel like you've achieved completion.
Right.
So it's almost like there's no chase, there's no rush to, there's no terminus, right?
Sure.
With Champions, if I have a full play set, like I'm pretty much done. So I'm waiting on the next set, and now I'm maybe deck building and trying new ideas. With KeyForge, you can never collect the whole set.
Right.
So you can just really, it's a certain amount of freedom that allows you to feel totally fine not chasing anything.
Yeah,
right?
it's a certain amount of freedom, and it's the kind of discovery that also I'm into, and I know it's been talked about, but like think about it this way: if you wanted to get like real millennial on it, is you could treat
I so
it,
do.
Treat it like
I've got some avocados over here, Jonathan.
Well, you could do like a craft beer kind of a thing.
Got
So
some
you
artisan
play the
cocktails.
deck, right? You can take some notes, right, and then you go to your next deck.
Some tasting notes, if you will.
right? Yeah, it's like this deck.
A little light on the removal for my taste.
Right.
Not a great summer deck.
And you can kind of give it its own personality, because again, that's where the sort of the Pokemon collect them all thing, but collection, personality, pets, kind of a thing comes in, and all that stuff is really appealing, because then you'll have those 12 things. Someone comes over, it's like, oh, you like IPAs? We'll take Windwig over here.
Man, it would be even. So imagine that concept. This is great. And you have maybe you have a tiny little notebook or something in each deck, and then anyone who plays it leaves a few notes. Like I do that with recipes. Like I'll leave I should have used a little less water. So like the people playing it could be like, pay attention to this combo. I found this when I was
that
playing
would be
the deck.
so cool.
And so you give it to a player, and they can read 200 games worth of notes real quick and just be like, oh, here's the whole history of this entire deck.
And everybody that's played it gets to put the little signature on it.
I would love that.
So
Play
cool.
it once, leave notes, and then trade it to somebody who's never played it before. Man, that would be so much fun. Like a library card where you can check it out.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome. I mean, there's my friend and the guy who does the sound, the intro song.
Oh, Wes. Yeah, Wes.
He's got a group of people that meets every night. They're all parents. They once their kids go to bed, they all they all live close to each other. They go to somebody's house and play a few games or whatever, and that would be so cool for that. You got even 4 people, you can make it through 12 decks pretty quick, and then shuffle all around, and
that's really cool.
It would be neat. There's a lot of really cool things this opens up, and one of the very interesting things for me, particularly about KeyForge, and why I think it's so worth noting, is that it has completely, at least on our side of things, changed the way that we've looked at the entire experience of how we experience card games. Warhammer came along, and it's the first one that we're now applying this to, which is maybe having all the cards isn't how this was supposed to go down.
Right.
Maybe this whole completionist thing is like the comic book bubble, and everyone's like, this is great, we should do it, this is how it should be played, when in reality, it is the discovery, and it's the balance of the game comes from the rarity of the cards.
Well, that's the thing I actually am liking and respecting most about Champions, is I feel like I have 2 worlds that I'm experiencing Champions in. One is the digital world, right? And that's actually the world where booster packs are essentially free for me because as you play, you earn rewards, you can buy cards, they do this really cool thing. Anyway, I guess I can't talk about it because of the beta thing. But there's some incredible things happening on the app, and I feel like that's where I want to have a full collection, and I want to be able to build anything and try new ideas. But then when I get in the physical space, I have a limited number of inputs, and I might have to play in a very imperfect deck based on, do I have the elf units that I need to do this concept, or do I have the Stormcast units I need, or do I have to do a mix of beasts and these things because that's what I have available? And so it feels more like a sealed pool where you are just building with what you have rather than what you might want. And then as you collect new cards, your decks open up a little bit. I just think that's a really cool way to do it. You have kind of your very competitive mode, and then you have your more kind of casual league play kind of mode in the physical space.
It is interesting to have the competitive mode in the digital space, and the casual one in the physical space.
Doesn't that fit though?
It feels right. Yes.
It does feel right.
And I don't know why.
Well, let's jump into it. So before we're gonna get to that, we're gonna come back to that.
Okay.
Just a few quick announcements. The Netrunner-Magnum Opus event, which I don't know if you guys are the same as me. I haven't put in the time to understand this as well as I should. But it's this big event, Magnum Opus, and essentially the way that it's going to go, it's kind of I guess it's a farewell to Netrunner event, you could say, and there's all sorts of craziness that's going on with this thing.
Looks like they're really going all out.
I mean, once I saw the jersey, I was like, well,
pretty cool.
This is unbelievable. So we've got, essentially, you go to this event, and then you're going to be into two separate teams representing two opposite gangs. And then as you win and lose games throughout the event, you are voting on things and creating, cards and whatnot. But so check this out. I'm just going to run it down. There's so much here. I'm on the laptop, so I'm going to just run this down. And also worth mentioning, we don't have video this time around because everybody's gone. Zach just left on his honeymoon to the UK and Europe and all sorts of places. His wedding was 2 nights ago.
Was that 2 nights ago? Yeah.
Monday night.
He's married now.
Labor Day night.
It was a lot of fun.
It was great. Jonathan was there. I was DJing. It was a really, really good time. And then Robert's in Yellowstone, so he's gone. He's over. Kira's out right now for vacation, general vacation. So we've got
we're bare bones over here.
We're bare bones. So we're just recording the audio. If you're just not catching that, the YouTube folks are like, "Why ain't they moving?
Why hasn't it moved yet?"
So Magnum Opus, you get a new Angela Swordfish jersey, which I'll give you this. It actually looks real good.
Yeah. Looks real good.
It looks better than any World shirt that's ever been made. That's for sure. There's some care that went into this, and I know there's a lot of Netrunner fans that are going to actually like this and wear this, and that's hard to do.
It's the right amount of world, fantasy world into reality for this type of product. It's not hitting anybody over the head with it. It's real cool.
Yeah, that's you're exactly right. That's so true. I was like, why is this? And it's because you wouldn't know it was a Netrunner thing, really, unless you knew it was a Netrunner thing, which is where the culture generally wants to be.
Yeah.
A complete playset of 6 different previously unreleased champion cards. So all of these best prize in gaming, people who have won various championships, it takes them 7 years to get their card out. And so I guess they've rushed them all out, and everybody's going to get a set of them.
That's cool.
I believe they're going to be available to print later on as well, so that the world can get them, or I'm sure the community will make that happen.
Okay.
There's an alternate art diversion of funds copy of the new NAPD identity that's central to this 1 versus many thing. So there's a new format that's 1 versus many, and there's this ID that's important, so somebody plays that, and then everybody...
Man, they're already blowing it out. You're only on the first image.
Yeah, they're blowing it out once it's dead.
Well, it means they had a lot of plans.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that's true. That is actually probably what that means. It's like emptying the coffers, as it were, of everything cool we had planned for Netrunner, which is just sad, as much as it is kind of cool. I would say cool a lot. It's not just cool. It's meaningful, I think.
It is meaningful.
I think somebody put a lot
it shows
of
that there was a
and
lot
care
of
into
love.
this.
And a lot of love for this game.
So you show up to the event, you're either the Los Scorpiones or Los Scorpions or 14K, and then you play throughout the first day, and there's some things you're going to vote on, and it's going to make the different cards, depending on what faction you're playing, where you want to go with those cards, and I don't know exactly how that's going to work. And then you get points on the second day, and then you do some voting, and you can earn points a lot of different ways, but I think is a really smart thing for organized play. You can do the 1 versus many side event,
Yeah.
You can do the Genesis role-playing adventure to earn a point.
Ooh, that's cool.
Which is killer.
That's a lot of fun.
And then so whoever wins gets this weird like Voltron click tracker, 4-piece click tracker thing, which is, it's okay. It's interesting. I mean, I think it's interesting.
It's interesting, yeah.
I just don't like things that fit together. Players are never going to use this fiddly fit together thing.
Well, here's the deal.
You've seen people play Netrunner, right?
Yes.
It's like they have it's like they're covered in gasoline, and once the game is over, they get to put themselves out. They cannot be bothered with fiddly, clicky stuff. They want to just go, and get the adrenaline of the net.
Yep, just make it happen. Well, and one thing, and I really don't want to criticize other people's designs, but it does strike me as very difficult from a game state perspective if there's no positive, active, and inactive side. Mm-hmm. So it's just like if it's connected or not. If it's connected, are the two like I've used this click or I haven't used this click? I'm sure people use it, but it seems like it's a lot more prone to error that way.
Yeah, but it's a cool piece.
It looks awesome.
Nonetheless.
I will say it looks awesome.
We'll take it. And,
the silhouette of it is amazing.
It's just an extra thing for winning the
why not?
war crime, so it's a fine thing.
It's cool.
Then we got the World Champs prizes were announced as well. They look great. Titan and Max, frosted identity cards. They got some gold.
Those cards look great.
Mirrored black tokens. We got some tags and bad publicity that look really good. This is a step up for sure. Top 8 players get extended art identity cards with event-specific frames. I mean, this is the kind of stuff where it's like...
It's great.
So much
the
cool.
The playmat is next level.
Playmat looks incredible.
This is all, by the way, taken from the post on Fantasy Flight's site.
Yeah, you got to check it out at FFG. Top 16 earn a medallion, which nobody's ever cared about, I don't think. Top 8 players earn a wooden NAPD token box.
Not bad.
That's crazy. Top 4 win some more IDs. We've got a big plaque with Reyna as the finalist. And then a big playmat and a trophy and all sorts of stuff. It's just, you look at this and, like I said, it's a little bittersweet.
Yep.
That's what I'll say, because this is the game, this is what you envisioned as what Netrunner could be from an organized play perspective.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, on like the second year.
And if this, or the first, right? And I understand FFG was in a much different place then and did not anticipate the success of the game. But it's kind of sad that its best notes are its last notes, which it just would have been cool to see what would have happened if this level of support was given from the start.
Yeah, but as they say in movies, if your first act is good and your last act is good, the second act doesn't matter.
That's right. People will remember.
People at least remember it, yeah.
Right? We also have the Return of the Dunwich Legacy thing, this upgrade expansion for the Dunwich Legacy cycle of Arkham. So it's this long box. It's good for storing, I believe, all of that cycle's cards. Mm-hmm. And then it introduces some new cards to have a different take on running through Dunwich Legacy.
Have you done that? Is that what you did at with old Matt?
I did that with Matt.
Yeah,
and
it looks super cool.
It's not harder. It's just different, and it's a way to take the cards you've already bought, add a little bit to the pile, and to have a totally new experience with Dunwich. And you've got a notepad kind of thing.
Nice.
It looks pretty insane.
I love that kind of stuff. I love taking something and looking at it in a different way, and I like the fact that they're doing that.
There is no shortage of creativity when it comes to using every part of the Arkham
I mean,
fish.
yeah, goodness gracious, look at old Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, that's true.
That old jalopy's still going.
And I gotta tell you, man. So I demoed the digital game at Gen Con. And then having now played the Champions app as well. The digital game is okay.
Sure.
Lord of the Rings digital game. It honestly, for as long as it's taking, I was surprised it wasn't quite as polished as I thought it would be. And I was also surprised at how much you really have to understand the physical game to understand what's going on in the digital game. There's not a lot of that's kind of walked through and understood. So I hope that by the time that releases, I don't think it has already, it has a little more polish on it, because I've seen now Champions, and it's clearly a very well-honed effort.
Nice.
And so I hope that they don't, go all in on this digital format for Lord of the Rings and then just kind of like, just kind of put it out.
Well, you got Caleb just cranking it out. You've heard about the what he did at Gen Con, right? Where the one team makes the encounter deck for the other team.
Now, there's an element of this that can provide infinite replayability to games like Arkham and Lord of the Rings. And yet another reason why cooperative LCGs are set for the long term. But it reminds me of whenever you'd make levels in Excitebike or
Yeah,
Tony
exactly,
Hawk or whatever else.
exactly.
Like if I could set you on this, hey, can you make us an Arkham adventure for Saturday night? And then you write up a quick narrative and include the cards that you want to include. Like if they really open that space up to custom, quests and developers where you can post on your Board Game Geek or your forums or whatever and say, here's mine, like try this out. It's super challenging, or it's like really fun, long narrative. That could be a whole new space that keeps that game going forever.
Yeah. I am continuously, and this has happened very recently, but I'm reminded so much of old Warcraft 3.
I love that. We still play it, though.
I know, we still play it like once a month. We still play it, but that's because they allowed people to take their assets and make whatever they wanted to with it. And I think games like Lord of the Rings and games like Arkham have enough like inputs that can be messed around with, that you can really allow for a second life or a third life on these things in the imaginations of people. The elements are there. The triggers are there, right? To go back to Warcraft 3 map editor, which I spent a lot of time in. You can put everything you need to put just by the rules as they exist and just shuffling some stuff around. And I mean, that's pretty cool.
It's so cool. And Matt's not doing these designer challenges. You've seen this?
No.
So he's posting, at least he's posted once, a designer journal that is, here's my designer challenge to everybody. And it essentially takes one of the scenarios or a number of the scenarios in Arkham and says, do this differently. Start differently here, maybe different locations, different approaches to this, treat this act differently, this scenario differently. So essentially providing a new challenge within, cool. just by giving us the text for how to do this. And so like that too can extend the life forever of this kind of thing, where like, once a quarter you get a new challenge from Matt and it's like, have you tried doing it like this? And then everyone's like, oh my gosh, have I? No. Okay, so this is something that I want to dive into this idea that we've been coming around to for, I think this is kind of the Covenant brand as a whole has been looking at and really thinking about, why is it that physical games matter on a level that seems deeper and more meaningful than digital games? And we've had quite a few podcasts about this topic in the past, so we won't recycle those points too much here, but having played the Champions app.
That's the thing that's worth noting. That's what's changed.
Yes, that is what's changed. And queuing up for games and having those experiences where you're communicating with other people through like little smiley faces or frowny faces or a couple of preset commands of like, haha, those kinds of things. There's certainly a big difference between me pulling that app out and playing a game and me getting my cards ready, shuffling them up and playing a game in person. And I think there's a lot of fear, and it's a little bit of underground fear in the industry itself that is the reality of Magic the Gathering and its place in the industry at this point as a physical card game, competing with the likes of Hearthstone and now Champions and a lot of other digital titles.
There's
Artifacts coming up, and potentially anything that's stemming from that new Cyberpunk such and such game.
Cyberpunk 2077.
Like the Witcher thing that happened. I think it's the same people that did that card game.
Sure is.
So that space is getting more and more crowded, and I think one of the big concerns is that, well, why print the cards at all?
Right.
And this is something that's important, and so I want to lay out as a excuse me for being so pretentious, but as somebody who has at least studied a good deal of philosophy.
So enough, they gave you a piece of paper about it.
They gave me a piece of paper that said, "Hey, you studied this. Good luck out there." The way that these things usually start, I think it's important to just lay out a word or a term that we're going to use, and then I think over the next it's going to be a long period of time, we can work to define what exactly that term means and kind of have it as a guidepost and a lighthouse, if you will, that kind of gives us a place to put our foot in the ground and say, like, we're going to actually try to define what this means and unpack it. And I want that term to be presence.
Okay.
Presence. Presence,
not the Santa Claus
as in
kind.
You and I, the presence of us in the room together and each other's presence, when we're having an experience in the physical world.
Okay.
And there's an element of intangibility to this.
Yes.
So the definition requires some kind of esoteric, feeling out.
Yes.
And I want to start with a comparison.
Okay.
Kind of a ranking system of less presence to more presence. I was noticing this just the other day. Let's say you and I are in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you and I are sitting next to each other, and I'm going to give you 4 examples of things we could be doing. So, 1, we're sitting next to each other, and we're both staring at our phones. Okay. So to me, that is, even though we're in the same room, I feel very little presence in that moment. Usually I'm very much locked into what I'm doing on a computer or on a phone, and the other person is there, but I'm not immediately connected in a kind of meaningful way to that person. But we can break that down a little bit with a second example, which is if the two of us are in the same room and we're watching television together. Or we're looking at the same screen.
I was going to say, could you make it where you're both looking at the same phone?
Yeah. So like, let's say we're looking at some meme or some video together. There's certainly more presence there than when we're on our individual devices. Like even if you were to send me an email with this link in it and I clicked it and I watched it and you knew I was watching it, if we're watching it together, there's some kind of shared experience that is greater than watching it separately.
Right.
Certainly.
That's true.
So then the third thing is, let's say we're both in the same room and we are, let's just make it easy. Let's say we are having a conversation.
Okay.
So to me, that is kind of getting at the significant presence element. We're in the same room, we're aware of each other, we're connected to each other, we're focused on each other. And that's kind of like to me, that's pretty far.
You're reacting to each other, right?
We're aware of each other, we're looking at each other, we're communicating. That to me is a high presence moment. Okay. And then somewhere between us looking at the same screen and us being actively involved in conversation is us playing a game together. A physical game together where we have some attention paid to the game and some attention paid to each other, but all of the attention is stemming from what we're doing either outside of the game or inside of the game. So we have to be very focused on the other person and the way that they're interacting with the game in front of us.
Okay.
And even the strategies they're using or the cards that they're playing or the looks that they're giving or the side eye that I just got or are you bluffing or not?
Right.
So you're still very much locked into the person. I think that's just a tiny bit less presence than if we were actively involved in conversation. Now, in a lot of situations, I think the amount of presence that is there whenever we're having a conversation can be too much.
It can be overwhelming.
That not only are we engaged in a pretty intimate exchange, but that we're both relying on each other to continue this conversation so that it doesn't become awkward for both of us.
Right.
And there's depending on the type of person that you are, there's a scale of stress that comes with that kind of interaction. So I think that even going a little bit less on the presence scale actually can yield you a much more productive or meaningful experience because the game soaks up all of the potential awkwardness.
That's correct.
You can always look down,
Yep.
You can always look at your hand, you're not obligated to say anything. So it's almost more natural or more organic than if you and I are standing in a room relying on each other to have a conversation for 20 minutes or figuring out how to exit with some level of grace, if you will. Yeah. So that's the scale I want to lay out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
I agree with that. Yes, I do.
So that I think is the presence argument that I want to start making.
Okay.
Is that there is something about playing the physical game, and if we take Champions, for instance, digitally is a thing, certainly, but you lose the presence element. And when you play physically, you lose some of the digital advantages, but you gain that presence element.
Yes.
Do you feel that?
I feel that, yeah. I feel that. Now the thing is, here's the thing about presence, is that I really would like to define it as a non-mystical sort of a thing.
Oh, good luck, yeah.
And I think the way to do that is to contrast it to isolation, because isolation is a known quantity, right? Isolation leads to depression. Isolation actually can, a lot of isolation, especially in the younger years, can actually cause the brain to form as if it had undergone trauma. You got the isolation of a solitary confinement, which is doing researchable damage to people.
Certainly.
So if that's on one side, then we can, I think, easily put presence on the other side as the opposite of isolation.
Right.
So
I like that.
We can start there. And that way we don't have to be like, well, presence is good because presence is good. But we can at least say presence is good because isolation is bad.
Okay, that's fair.
And I think
that's almost it's not, but it's almost a Karl Popper like falsification kind of concept where you can identify what non-presence actually is.
Yes.
Therefore, it is actually a reasonable concept. So if you and I are playing Champions overseas, let's say I've got the app, you've got the app, we're not together. Let's say we're alone in our rooms and we play every night together on the app. Is that an acceptable level of presence to fight off the negatives of isolation, or are you still in the isolation box whenever you're engaged in something like a video game or a digital game without anybody actually in the room or physically around you?
That is a very interesting question. Because I would lean towards that. No, it's not. But then again, the research shows that yes, it is.
It can't, because online communities.
It can be. Online communities grow, but the other thing that has to be understood is that we are now a more connected society than we ever have been, and there are more instances of isolation and depression through loneliness than there has been documented throughout the world, right?
Okay, fair enough.
So, on the one hand, it's more than zero. Right? So, and anything more than zero is moving in a positive direction. That's mathematics. But I wonder if it's a sustainable positive.
Well, and it might be that, isolation certainly has its negatives, and there's a minimum viable level of presence that can, kind of move you out of the negative consequences box, or at least like put you in a pretty good spot where I know people, and I've been a part of this, where you're in a World of Warcraft guild,
right?
And you're playing with the same people every night over, and you're talking on Skype or whatever that weird thing is that everybody uses.
What was
TeamSpeak
or I forgot
whatever.
what it was.
One of those. It had a weird name, and so that might be enough to at least give you some level of presence and connection.
But that's an interesting. There's two interesting parts about that. One is the majority of guilds that I know of have at some point met each other in real life.
Oh yeah.
And I think even more than that most of them moved away. The close ones moved away from a text-based chat to a voice-based chat, which is a whole different level of stuff to react to, and that's bringing in some more stuff with the different ways that we communicate thought. But so let's go back to the people that you're overseas and you're playing with someone. I think maybe the best way to understand the idea of presence is in the same, or even isolation, is hunger. So you can eat bread and water, and that will keep you sustained. It won't make you healthy, but it's better than not that. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
And at least and then there is that other thing. Well, and then if you're reaching out to that person on a consistent basis, at least you have that, and then that will never, I don't think, be enough. I think at some point you will always want to meet, which is again getting to the more mystical. Why is that the case?
Sure, yeah.
That's what I mean when I say that it's a positive, but I don't know that it's enough to to make you healthy in that respect.
Sure,
right?
sure. So it fights off the hunger, but it doesn't necessarily give you all of the benefits of a full meal,
yes.
if you will.
And still potentially, you could be, to keep the metaphor going, you could be eating, which will keep you alive, but not enough, and so you begin to lose weight and begin to become unhealthy.
Sure.
You'll sustain yourself, but you won't thrive.
So I think the key thing, at least being suggested, is that there is an inherent benefit, even if it's just contrasted with isolation, an inherent benefit to physical space being shared with other people, and that it's not just that the physical space is being shared, but that the attention is being given in both directions, and that there is a communication, verbally and otherwise, that's going on between participants during a tabletop game that has inherent value, that is inherently worth doing, and that is meaningful. And a digital game is not going to be able to replicate that,
Right.
presumably.
Presumably.
And secondarily, that I think a lot of this desire for the kind of physical human face-to-face interaction is not understood in a way that people actively decide to seek it out, but that they subconsciously
Yes.
find themselves
Yes.
seeking it out. And that's probably for some kind of reason deep down that we might not even fully appreciate yet, if ever. And that's what we would call presence.
I think one way to maybe think about it, because I've been thinking a lot about this for various reasons. There seems to be a desire for humans to be paid attention to. This goes back to when we're 2 or 3 years old. Hey, look at me, look what I'm doing. And good attention versus bad attention. If someone's not paying attention to people, generally they will then start to act out in order to be reacted to.
Sure.
And you get a lot of that with the trolls on the internet. You can see a lot of this behavior sort of manifesting itself in very interesting ways. And I wonder if that has something to do with it, like being given attention and then being reacted to. So, for instance, if you're playing on the Champions app, what the things that you are doing are causing someone to react, but not necessarily to attribute that reaction to you.
I totally agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, because when I win a game of Champions, I don't feel the same level of pride, I would say, and achievement that I do whenever I play in real life, or even seeing your name on a leaderboard.
Yeah.
Is a level of that, but it's not nearly the same as winning like a 600-person tournament in person.
In person, right.
And that all of these people are gathered around and understand that you are the person who has maybe prepared the most and came in with the best strategy and outsmarted everybody. And knowing that all of these people recognize that, to me, is more significant than potentially hundreds of thousands of people seeing your name on a leaderboard or your avatar on a leaderboard. So there definitely is that piece, and I think that that's an important part of the competitive scene in tabletop games in any capacity, and the competitive scene in most anything is that desire to be recognized and understood to be like, oh, this is a significant person here.
Right.
Something significant has happened that you have done. And now everybody knows it, and you should feel proud of yourself for having achieved in this kind of way.
And you've basically caused some sort of ripple of reaction throughout, the space kind of continuum. But that's that mystical stuff.
Butterfly wings, etc.
So if being reacted to and giving their attention to you and you giving your attention to somebody is maybe one of the foundations of what gives you more or less presence. Let's do a quick test. What do you think gives you the most amount of presence vis-a-vis another person? Playing a 2-player game of Arkham Horror or playing a 2-player game of Champions in real life, let's say. So in Arkham Horror, the reason I ask this is you're reacting to the deck, right? You're flipping the deck over and it's doing something and you're reacting to that. In a competitive game like Destiny or Champions or KeyForge, you are reacting to what the other person is doing directly. So
here's I have a good understanding of this, having been involved in both very heavily. I hate to say that it's a little bit different. It's not quite apples and oranges, but the main difference here is that immediately the answer is that the one-on-one game is more presence for me. We have to be so locked in to the individual actions and reactions that are happening between ourselves and the board, and everything that's happening is stemming from one of us. The game will not proceed unless we do something. So if I'm taking a long time to play, like that is affecting you, and I'm aware of that, and we're very much locked in together to have this experience. With Arkham, it's similar, but the thing that Arkham allows for is we're not nearly as locked in to each other in regards to the game. In that, like, it might be, 6 minutes before we get around to, like, flipping the next encounter card because something just happened. But what happens in Arkham is we can, at any point, zoom out, and the group just agrees to have a conversation instead of playing the game. So Arkham actually allows for you to go in and out of the game way easier. And there's a more chill atmosphere to it. So when you're pulled out of the game, that connection is very significant. And then when you kind of go into the game, you're watching essentially the computer do its thing and you're reacting to it together, but you're not quite as focused in on each other because you're not driving the action of the board. Whereas the one-on-one game, for sure.
Yeah.
But that does create, there's less opportunities, I think, in the competitive game to sit back and have a quick conversation.
That's true, yeah.
Because first of all, you both have to agree that that's what you want. Whereas with Arkham, sometimes you're just pulled into it. And you don't have any choice because if nobody else is flipping the card, you're just going to have to sit there and have that conversation with everybody because it ain't happening. With a one-on-one game, like, you can have much more control over the pace of the game and how things are going. And so, yeah, I think that one-on-one experience,
it's more of a dance. I mean, you're both sort of going back and forth.
and you're just kind of locked into it together. And yeah, the cooperative games, you can pull out of that a lot more and have a conversation aside from the game.
So there's a word that's been coming up a lot in my research. I saw it a lot in Sleeper Better. I've seen it a lot in other things. But people have found this thing to be true, but there's been no further research that I can find. And this is definitely worth a Google for anybody who's interested. I believe it's synchronicity, but the core concept is this, is that there are many different things that we can do as people that miraculously sync up our heartbeats. Watching things together, playing a game together is a big one. Even if it's a co-op game, like a Twitch kind of game. They've found that there's a lot of things that allow people to sync up with their heartbeats, which is very interesting.
I think we're going to find out a lot more of that stuff is happening as we move along. Definitely.
And I wonder, again, you look at that and you start to wonder. The other things that I would consider is that human beings are herd animals. And so there is...
Are we?
Yes. Oh, yeah, very much so.
For sure?
Yeah. We're at least, we would call it tribal. But,
okay,
we have evolved
exist
through
together,
exist together in small units. And that's been going on forever. So there's probably something there about, the unity of a group that brings us some evolutionarily beneficial sort of chemical dump.
Like just satisfying for
so there may be something,
unknown reasons.
Yeah, there may be something to that. So yeah, there's that, and then you also sort of start looking at the way that screens or newspapers back in the day. There's been sort of this ever since radio, newspapers, books. There has been a desire for the capturing of human beings' attention, and there's a documentary called The Century of Self that talks about it a little bit, or quite a bit. And so you do have things that are not like what's the word? Where basically crystallize. You've honed it down into like a raw just attention magnet.
Right. Yeah.
Screens are very much that. Instagram is very much that. These things exist because they can capitalize on the attention of people. Whereas you get to zoom out a little bit with the less tangible stuff that's not vying for attention by its very nature. So I don't know. There's a lot of stuff to consider.
Screens and things definitely feel like the most just drilled down version of something that is just raw attention capturing. Like it's taken away all of the kind of accoutrement that used to come with that, and it's just like we know the Candy Crush. The rule set that will get people to continue lizard braining over and over and over.
Yeah.
And I think there's some reactions to that, and there's some movements going in the other direction, and I think that's what we're seeing with kind of the back to X movements and paying more attention to like the genuine, lasting, requiring of effort kind of artisan things.
And I do think
candor.
I do think that you look at these games like Artifact and like Hearthstone, and it does seem worrisome that there are so many people playing it and potentially they are drawing away from the pool. I would counter with the fact that I have never seen ever human beings take to something digitally they didn't eventually try to create physically. I mean, even, goodness gracious, like computer polyrhythms, like people have figured out how to actually drum it. I guarantee you Tony Hawk Pro Skater created more real-life skateboarders than if it had never existed.
Yeah,
and
true.
So if you start thinking about it in that way, it's going to cast a much wider net, but people are continuously drawn to the physical, and I don't know why, and it's worth thinking about.
You're saying that I'm thinking about if I only experienced Champions online, and then I had the option and then I learned suddenly that like people get together and do this like with each other physically. They bring their cards and they play in events and they have a good time together. I would be wanting to do that 100%.
I mean, even Dota now is in a huge stadium filled with people looking at people.
Yeah,
it has no reason to be there.
It's really wild. Yeah, so presents, that's the reason.
Yeah.
So we'll keep honing in on this.
Yeah,
I'm happy to have these kinds of discussions. I guess whenever everybody else leaves, we just kind of, it's raining outside, it's a little bit dark, and so we just kind of got into it. So I appreciate the conversation.
It's also, I love putting the seeds of thought into other people's heads that I think are probably smarter or, at least have other experiences than I do. And so we have now a vast array of listeners that hopefully some of them will think about this and maybe we can get somewhere with it.
Yeah, let's ask that question. So stick around. We'll ask a presence question at the end of the cast. Let's get to our own questions while we're here. Hashtag AskKevin is what you can use on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram to get your questions answered here on the cast. And we'll go on to question number 1 from Diogenes Kion.
That was close.
Yeah, that seems right.
Yeah,
Diogenes Kion. Team Commander, are you still planning to make X-Wing 2.0 compatible templates? And I'll wait to get some if they'll be out soon. Thank you so much for waiting. That's hard to do, I know. We are still planning on that, yes.
We are, yes.
We are still planning on it. They got kicked back just a tiny bit due to some production issues and KeyForge kind of hitting the scene. And we jumped on that really quick. But they are on the production calendar right now. And I see no reason why that won't happen.
I see no reason. Yeah, I mean, this goes against every fiber of my being, but I see no reason why that wouldn't happen before the end of 2018.
Oh yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Okay.
Very easily.
Okay.
Easily before the end of 2018. If that doesn't happen, they probably aren't going to get out the door.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll look at it. But we're actively working on them right now.
Yes.
If that answers
Correct.
the question. David Vezra, old friend David here, asked Kevin, based on publisher numbers, there have to be way more people treating the expandable games you guys cover as another board game than as a conduit for organized play. I like that. First of all, I just like that distinction of the idea that these expandable games are acting as a conduit for organized play. I think they're really good at that.
Yeah.
And that's something that is not as recognized as it should be. That's the whole reason that expandable games to us are so awesome, which I hadn't really fully, encapsulated like David did here. They are a conduit for long-lasting and consistent communities to form and grow together. Like the people who come in to play Thrones every week or to play KeyForge every week, even though that's like a different category, and that may be a bit different on the organized play side too. So maybe not the greatest example, but. It's the same community over time, and that's really nice. There's something about it, even whenever you see the same people at big national events and big worldwide events.
Very much so.
These are constant at conventions. These are communities that kind of get together and grow together. So it is very much a conduit for organized play. And just organized people.
Yeah, organized meetups.
Do you guys ever see yourselves getting more into the board game community, at least locally? These communities can be gateways for each other. That is 100% true. David, of course we do. We always are looking for ways to do that. And we've got the free board game wall here on at our store. The thing that we don't do is we don't like retail and stock a bunch of board games. For a number of reasons. It's a difficult thing to do well, and it's certainly a difficult thing to do profitably. So board game stores that are able to do that are very good at what they do. Staying on top of board games and the latest and how many copies to buy and what's going to be hot, what's not going to be, is less our bag.
Yes.
The speculation element of that, and it's more about having these expandable games that we know we can build communities for, that we can grow over time. At least that's the hope and the idea. So board games are a little trickier, but I think you're right in noting that if you can bring in the board game audience, they can easily bridge into those expandable games and potentially find something that really speaks to them. And those expandable game players can also find their way into the world of board games, certainly on the off time, or if they come in and nobody's there to play, but there's an extra slot for, Catan or whatever it is. You can see how old I am because I mentioned Catan. Gloomhaven, maybe a better example. Scythe, etc. I'm cool. So
the hot games.
So that is important. The real question is, what do board gamers want, and how do you get them in your store? And we've always thought that providing a clean space, good atmosphere, some beers on tap, and free tables is pretty much what a board gamer might want.
That's the hope.
We do have a pretty sizable board game community that comes in, especially on Sundays here locally, and I presume that the store being what it is why that kind of happened organically.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
do think the games, and especially games like KeyForge, they're starting to build bridges between the two.
Godtier's trying to do that as well.
Yeah, Godtier's trying to do that as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Question 3, Landon. Do you think, Landon Dastrup here, do you think the unique card game idea could be applied to pre-constructed decks for other collectible games? Giving players the option to collect or maybe just buy a deck and have something that is more competitive than your standard starter deck. I think that's absolutely fascinating.
Yes, 1,000 times, yes. I think it could be one of the greatest innovations that we've seen in the last 5 years.
The thing that's, it's hard. This is not an easy thing to produce, manufacture, algorithm out, etc. This took a long time, I think, for FFG to get into. If it were possible, like immediately and easily, I think this would be great. Like if you had a randomly generated with a set of constraints, death decks and like order decks and whatnot for champions, that would certainly be awesome. What I think the biggest challenge is going to be is that definitely impacts the way that you design cards. Whereas in KeyForge, you know the singular format and that it's going to be randomized. You can design cards in a certain way that takes advantage of that format and that really it changes the power level and general usefulness of every card because you assume that it might be solo in a deck without any accompanying synergies, or it might pair with a whole bunch of synergistic things, so you have to balance it differently than in a deck building game where you presume that you're programming in certain combos and synergies that players will explore, discover, find out, and then move on to the next set. So if it's still very much a deck building focused game, your random decks being generated are just not going to be anywhere near a human generated deck. If there was a way to do that, mechanically, mathematically, could be possible. But I think that'd be a big challenge.
Yeah, I think it'd be a big challenge. I think it could be really cool though for any number of things. If you want to do a different format where whoever shows up, they all get random decks, or like if Netrunner was still around, all the corps have random decks, so you've never seen the ice before and you're just trying to run it. There's all sorts of really neat stuff that I think can be done, and even just more production of just off the shelf decks, I think could be a great deal.
Absolutely. Moving on to last 2 questions. Michael Ormiston asked, Covenant, do you think that stretch goals hurt games that are run through Kickstarter? As an example, Dark Souls created loads of crazy stretch goals. The game blew up on Kickstarter. They met and exceeded ridiculous goals, and then everything got pushed way back in release because they couldn't fulfill the goals. They still haven't shipped some of the stretch goals. That's like 7 years ago. That's a little hyperbolic, but not terribly hyperbolic. Love the show. You do great work for the community. Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate that more than you could know.
I really wish we had more time for this question because it's interesting. It's fascinating because the problem with stretch goals is a human problem.
Yes,
there's no mechanical thing
up
about it. It's just like, oh my gosh, and I've been on Kickstarter, right?
Yeah.
And I've had some things that have been funded through that.
You've got a number of things.
And you start seeing the money roll in, and you start to get excited. And if you're a creative person who's in love with the project that you're doing, and then you're sitting at home at night thinking about all the money that's rolling in, and now there's these things called stretch goals, and well, what other cool stuff do I want to do for this game? You can put it on there the next day, and then people say, yes, that's a great idea. Well, that gets really addictive. Right. The problem is, when this is with all creative endeavors, is everything takes much longer than anyone imagines.
Or wants to take. Way beyond what you even, want to promise.
And they have a way of cascading. If there's one problem, if you have to put your human attention on one thing for 2 weeks instead of 1 week, it's not on anything else, right? And so then that gets cascaded down, and then, now all these things are off, so I got to pay more attention to this, and it goes and it goes and it goes. And it's just, I don't think stretch goals in and of themselves hurt games.
Yeah, you can't say that, right?
Right.
That's I think that's impossible to really prove / it's not consistent. It's not logically consistent. Stretch goals happen because there's people willing to fund a game to get stretch goals. So if people stopped funding them, they wouldn't happen, period. And as long as human beings are willing to say, yes, we will put more money into this to unlock these stretch goals, companies have every incentive to continue going after them. Now, the hazard for an organization that decides to do stretch goals is that, like Dark Souls, if we don't deliver on this, we take a huge brand hit. We have a lot of angry customers, and our ability to do this kind of stretch goal system should be reduced later on because people now have more caution when they approach our business. It's all the risk is on the producer here, right? Like they're simply saying, hey, if you give us more money, we'll start making this. And people are saying, we love that idea.
Yeah.
And that may as well be a retail exchange. It may as well be somebody pre-orders a Saga set from us and we have a deal and then we break the deal.
Right.
And it's like we didn't ship it for 2 years. That person should not buy a Saga set from us again, right? But if consumers continue to fund stretch goals and continue to get burnt on stretch goals, they'll continue happening.
Yeah.
So it really is, to me, a very market-driven thing. I mean, Kickstarter is a very free market thing. I think if you outlawed stretch goals or something, like that doesn't make any sense, and people would find a way around it anyway. So it's all about consumer psychology.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the other side of that is that people get swept up in the excitement, both the creators and the funders. And it's just, again, it's like going back to what we were talking about with Candy Crush. This is just one of those human things that everyone gets excited, they get themselves all whipped up, and then they just start throwing money at stuff. And again, I've been on both sides of that. I understand, but it's one of those things. Again, it's like the especially if you're going into a project without an understanding of your limit of stretch goals. It's like gambling, right? If you're like, well, we're not going to go past these 4 stretch goals that I've already decided, and we can keep them secret and make them surprising and stuff, but the moment you're like, well, you know what, we could do this, that's whenever you bet the extra $100 at the table that you swore you wouldn't, you know, and that's where things go bad.
And I always go back to Luke, Burning Wheel Luke, who ran like a number of Torchbearer Kickstarters and whatnot. The cleanest Kickstarters I've ever seen in my life. It was like, here's the thing. Do you want it? If so, here's what you need to fund. And then once we pass this number, it will actually happen as a project. And it happened. Production happened on time. Publishing happened. Everybody got their stuff shipped, and the thing was over. And he works at Kickstarter. Yeah. He's a really high level at Kickstarter. So certainly he felt in this instance that I'm not looking to like explode this thing. I just want my artistic project to be realized, period. So if consumers are going to keep funding stretch goals and if publishers are going to keep offering them, then this system is not going to change. But if consumers ever have had enough of stretch goals, then they won't exist anymore. And so if you don't like them, stop funding it. Stop shooting it. And then finally, question 5 for Nikonk2, which I have seen this name many, many times throughout all of our content. So thank you so much for following along with us. Are people really going to be trading their KeyForge decks? Why?
That's a good question.
The reason people trade traditional cards is because different cards are needed for different decks. Both partners of the trade can benefit because their desires and needs are different. If the unit of the product is a single deck, everyone will desire the more powerful decks, and no one with a very powerful deck is going to want to trade it away for a weaker deck. There will always be a winner and loser of the trade. I suppose people may want to temporarily swap just to have a different experience, but to permanently trade, what am I missing? I know exactly what's missing here.
Hit me.
Is this idea of stronger and weaker KeyForge decks.
Yes.
This is something that has plagued the kind of initial understanding of what a KeyForge deck is, and that every deck can be put on this spectrum of this one's clearly more powerful than this other one. That happens whenever human beings can get into a card pool and sort out absolutely best cards from worst cards and min-max it as hard as possible. I'm under the understanding, having seen the decks play and understanding the kind of the decks that we've seen, the algorithm that's being used so far has not generated those kinds of overly, oh my gosh, this is obviously a better deck, and it's way better than this weaker deck over here, the end. Every single KeyForge deck is simply playing differently, and all of the cards are working together in very different ways. And sometimes it takes 4, 5, or 6 plays before you start to understand the tempo of the deck and what you should be looking for, what you should be anticipating, kind of board you should be setting up for your later game with that deck, all these kinds of decisions. So I think we need to get out of the mindset of this is just a randomly constructed deck building game, and more it's a randomly constructed deck game.
Right.
The lack of the human building element of it creates a way smaller power curve between best deck and worst deck. And I would even be very troubled to define what is best in KeyForge and what is worst in KeyForge. I do not think it's nearly that cut and dry, and that the best deck is going to be very personal. Like, you want to play Martians,
right.
and you want it to work a certain way.
Yeah.
Right? I want my deck to work a certain way. Zach wants his deck to work a certain way. So to me, why you trade is you're trading for your play style.
That's exactly right.
Not the power level of the deck.
That's exactly right.
You agree with that?
I agree with that 100%. And I always think about, whenever something like this comes up, I think about old Sasha from Netrunner, well, I guess started off net decking, but then just kept the same deck and just played it over and over again. And it wasn't the best deck by any stretch of the imagination, but he knew it so well, and it fit how he thought so well that he was able to take it to great heights. And I think that's what KeyForge is going to do. And I think, like, if I get like a burn deck or a rush deck or something like that, I don't want that. It doesn't. It
may be super strong.
Yeah.
But why do you care?
That's
not how you want to play.
Right. Exactly. And so if that versus like some great Martian deck that Zach has, I'd trade it in a second.
Yeah.
Because it feels like it's more at home in my hands than the other one.
That's correct.
I think people are going to try to shuffle that out.
And the other thing that's important about trading with KeyForge is there's an entirely new paradigm, which is trading the deck before you've opened it. Zach's really big into this. I hadn't thought about it, but you open the box and there's shrink-wrapped cards, but on the outside is the 3 factions in the deck. That's all that you know about that deck, the name and the 3 factions. And so you can not remove the shrink wrap, and you can say, I've got an unopened Martian D's Shadows deck, and if those are your 3 favorite factions, maybe you have an unopened like Brobnar, Logos, whatever deck, and we might trade before we even see the contents of the actual deck. So you can start to refine based on the factions that you like to play. You can actually trade before you've unwrapped anything, and that also evens the playing field where nobody knows if it's stronger or weaker, if that's even a thing that can be applied, but you know that it'll be more the style that you want to play.
Right.
Makes sense?
That's cool. Yeah, makes sense to me.
All right, well, thank you guys so very much for listening. We kind of went for it today on the Kantian version of the Covenant cast, so I hope that was at least enjoyed by some of you who are still listening. I haven't turned it off 20 minutes in when we started rambling about presents. On that note, we have a question for you. Does this idea of presents even make sense? And if so, what would you define it as? Or rather, how would you define presence when it comes to physical games? Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, keep playing.